The great doors of the tribunal chamber slid open with a sound like thunder, and Commander Marcus Cole stepped inside alone. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and scars on his hands from battles that most species in this room had never heard of. And he wore the simple black uniform of Earth's United Defense Force, which looked almost laughable compared to the flowing robes and glittering armor of the alien delegates who filled the massive hall. The chamber itself was built to make visitors feel small, and it did its job well, with walls that stretched up for hundreds of meters and seats arranged in a great circle that rose like a mountain around the central platform where Marcus now stood. 7 species ruled the Galactic Concord, and representatives from all of them were here today, looking down at him with expressions that ranged from boredom to open contempt. The Valkyrie delegation sat to his left, their insectoid bodies clicking and buzzing as they communicated in their private language, and their compound eyes reflected Marcus 1,000 times over, each reflection showing a human who did not belong to his right. The Dazari coiled on their heated platforms, their serpentine bodies covered in scales that shifted color with their moods. And right now, those scales were a deep purple that Marcus had learned meant amusement mixed with disdain. The Elorians floated in their containment fields, beings of pure light and energy who considered physical bodies to be primitive limitations, and even they seemed to draw away from Marcus as though his very presence offended them. High above everyone else, on a platform carved from a single piece of crystal, sat High Arbiter Zinthus, the supreme judge of the tribunal and a member of the Krethni species. Massive crustaceans who had ruled the Concord for longer than humanity had existed as a species. Zinthus was old even by Krethni standards, his shell scarred and worn from centuries of political battles, and his 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with an expression that the human could not read. Commander Marcus Cole of Earth. The High Arbiter's voice boomed through the chamber, amplified by technology so advanced that it seemed like magic. You stand before this tribunal to answer for the crimes of your species against the sacred laws of the Concord, and you stand alone, which tells us much about how seriously humanity takes these proceedings. Marcus kept his face calm even as anger burned in his chest. Earth sent who they could spare, he replied, and his voice sounded thin and weak in the vast chamber. Our defense forces are stretched thin, protecting our border colonies from raiders who attack our ships and steal our people. Raiders that this tribunal has refused to address for 6 years despite our formal complaints. Laughter rippled through the chamber, or at least the alien equivalents of laughter. Clicks and hisses and pulses of colored light. The Dasari ambassador, a massive serpent named Sithar, whose scales were adorned with jewels from a dozen conquered worlds, raised her head and let her forked tongue flicker in the air. The primitive creature speaks of raiders, she said, and her translator rendered her hissing voice into something almost musical. Perhaps if humans could read the navigation charts we have used for 10,000 years, they would not fly their little ships into restricted space where accidents happen. More laughter, and Marcus felt his hands curl into fists at his sides before he forced them to relax. He had known this would happen, had been warned by Earth's diplomatic corps that the tribunal was not a place where humanity would find justice, and he had come anyway because he had a mission that none of these arrogant aliens could imagine. Let us proceed with the charges, Zinthus said, and a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the chamber, showing a human colony ship drifting in the darkness of space. The vessel designated Hope's Journey, carrying 3,000 human colonists, violated the Forbidden Zone 17 days ago, the Arbiter continued. The Forbidden Zone exists to protect the sacred remains of the architects, the ancient ones who built the foundations of our civilization before they vanished 1,000,000 years ago. And entry into this zone is punishable by the most severe sanctions the Concord can impose. Marcus looked at the image of the ship and felt a weight settle on his shoulders. 3,000 people. Families and scientists and dreamers who had set out to build a new home among the stars. And now they were being used as an excuse to punish humanity for daring to exist. The ship experienced a navigation malfunction, Marcus said, knowing even as he spoke that no one would believe him. They did not intend to enter restricted space. A malfunction, the Valkyrie delegate clicked, his mandibles spreading in what might have been a smile. How convenient that human technology fails at precisely the moment that would cause the most offense to the Concord. Perhaps we should discuss whether a species that cannot build reliable ships deserves to travel among the stars at all. Perhaps, another delegate added. This one an Elorian whose form pulsed with cold blue light. We should simply return humanity to their home system and let them develop for another 1,000,000 years. They clearly are not ready for the responsibilities of interstellar civilization. Marcus listened to them talk about his species, like they were discussing troublesome pets. And he let them talk, because every moment they spent mocking humanity was a moment that Earth's real mission continued, what none of these creatures knew. What they could not possibly imagine was that the Hope's journey had not malfunctioned at all. The ship had followed coordinates that had appeared in the dreams of its navigator. Coordinates that led to something in the Forbidden Zone that the Concord had spent 1,000,000 years trying to forget, and what they had found there had changed. Everything Marcus thought about the transmission he had received before leaving Earth. The frantic message from the Hope's journey that had described impossible things. Ancient machines waking from their long sleep and reaching out to human minds was something that felt almost like recognition. He thought about the orders he had been given. To delay the tribunal by any means necessary. To buy time for Earth scientists to understand what was happening. And he thought about the small device hidden in his pocket. The device that contained proof of everything the Concord feared. I request the opportunity to speak in humanity's defense, Marcus said. And his voice was steady despite the pounding of his heart. Zinthos made a sound that might have been a laugh. You may speak, human, though I doubt anything you say will change the outcome of these proceedings. The evidence against your species is clear, and the punishment will be severe. Marcus nodded and took a deep breath. He had one chance to do this right. One chance to turn the contempt of the galaxy into something else entirely. And if he failed, humanity would pay the price. But if he succeeded, the Galactic Concord would never look at humans the same way again. Thank you, High Arbiter, Marcus said. And for the first time since entering the chamber, he allowed himself to smile. I think you will find that what I have to say is very interesting indeed. The trial continued for 3 full rotations of the tribunal station. And Marcus Cole endured every moment of it with the patience of a man who knew something that his tormentors did not. Witness after witness came forward to testify against humanity. Delegates from species who had never visited Earth and never met a human in their lives. And they spoke with absolute confidence about how dangerous and primitive the young species truly was. They still practice individual combat among themselves, a Valkyrie scientist declared, his compound eyes glittering with disgust. They have not even evolved beyond physical violence as a means of resolving disputes. And they allow their young to consume media that glorifies such behavior. Their planet is divided into hundreds of separate governing bodies. A Dazari historian added, her scales rippling with colors that Marcus had learned meant contempt. They cannot even unite their own world. And yet they expect to be treated as equals among species that achieved global unity before humans had discovered fire. The Elorian delegate pulsed with cold light as it offered its own testimony. We have studied human neural patterns, the being of energy said, and we find them chaotic and unpredictable, filled with emotional responses that override logical thinking. And they possess a capacity for both great cruelty and irrational compassion that makes them fundamentally unstable as a species. Marcus listened to all of it without interrupting. Though his jaw ached from clenching it so tight, he wanted to tell them about the hospitals humans had built on colony worlds, about the rescue missions that saved alien ships in distress, about the scientists who worked day and night to find cures for diseases that affected species humanity had never met. He wanted to tell them about the children on Earth who looked up at the stars with wonder, about the artists who painted the beauty of alien worlds, about the dreamers who believed that one day all the species of the galaxy might learn to understand each other. But he said nothing, because he knew that nothing he said would change their minds. They had already decided what humanity was, and no amount of evidence would convince them otherwise. On the third day, High Arbiter Zinthus called the chamber to order and prepared to announce the verdict. The evidence is clear. The ancient Crethany rumbled, his voice echoing through the vast space. Humanity has violated the sacred laws of the Concord, and humanity must face the consequences of that violation. If I may, the Sari Ambassador Sithara interrupted, her jeweled scales catching the light as she rose from her coils. I wish to propose a solution that would benefit the Concord while also teaching humanity an important lesson. Zinthus nodded for her to continue. We should establish a quarantine around human space, Sithara said, and Marcus could hear the pleasure in her translated voice. No human ships permitted beyond their own system. No human presence on Concord stations or worlds. Complete isolation until they have proven themselves worthy of rejoining galactic civilization. Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber, and Marcus saw delegates nodding and clicking and pulsing in agreement. An excellent suggestion, the Volcari delegate added. Perhaps in another 10,000 years, humans will have evolved enough to deserve our attention. I have a question, Marcus said. And the chamber fell silent. Speaking out of turn was a serious offense. But Marcus had stopped caring about offending these creatures long ago. The human will be silent, Zinthus warned. But there was something in his ancient eyes that looked almost like curiosity. I just want to know one thing, Marcus continued. Ignoring the warning, all of you have spent 3 days telling me how primitive and dangerous humanity is. How we do not deserve to stand among the great species of the Concord. How we should be locked away until we have grown up enough to meet your standards. He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensors and energy fields of every delegate. But I have not heard anyone explain why you are so afraid of us. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Sithara laughed, a hissing sound that her translator rendered as something almost musical. Afraid, she repeated. The Lasari have conquered 100 worlds, human. We have nothing to fear from a species that cannot even keep their ships from flying into restricted space. And yet you want to quarantine us. Marcus replied, you want to lock us away where we cannot bother you, where we cannot learn your secrets or challenge your power. And you call that a lesson when it looks very much like fear to me. You go too far, Zinthus warned again. But Marcus kept talking. The architects built everything you have, he said, and his voice grew stronger with every word. The jump gates that let you travel between stars, the stations that orbit your worlds, the terraforming engines that made your planets livable. You did not create any of it. You just found it after the real builders were gone. The chamber erupted in shouts and clicks and hisses. But Marcus raised his voice above them all. You have spent 1,000,000 years living in someone else's house and pretending you built it yourselves. And now a new species comes along that asks questions you cannot answer. And your only response is to make us go away. Silence, Zinthus roared. And the chamber fell quiet. The High Arbiter leaned forward on his crystal platform, and Marcus could see something burning in his ancient eyes. You speak of the architects, Zinthus said slowly. You speak of things you cannot possibly understand. I understand more than you think, Marcus replied. And he reached into his pocket for the device he had been carrying since he left Earth. I understand why you made the forbiddance. Zone forbiddance. I understand why you never try to study the architect ruins. And I understand why the sight of a human ship in that space has made all of you so very, very nervous. He activated the device, and a hologram appeared above his palm. It showed a structure vast beyond imagination. A sphere of ancient metal and crystal, surrounded by thousands of machines that made the Concorde's most powerful warships look like toys. We found this, Marcus said. And more importantly, it found us. The chamber had gone so quiet that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. The architects left something behind. He continued, something that has been waiting for a very long time. I think you all know exactly what I am talking about. High Arbiter Zinta stared at the hologram, and for the first time since the trial began, Marcus saw something in his eyes that looked like fear. The Sentinels, the old Crethany whispered. You woke the Sentinels, Marcus smiled. We did more than wake them, he said. We gave them exactly what they have been waiting 1,000,000 years to find. The hologram expanded to fill the entire chamber, and every delegate in the tribunal found themselves surrounded by images of ancient machines that made their most advanced technology look like children's toys. The Sentinels hum in the darkness of space like sleeping giants, each one the size of a small moon. Their hulls covered in weapons and sensors and systems that no species in the Concorde had ever been able to understand. These images come from the hoax journey, Marcus explained, his voice steady even as he watched the fear spread through the chamber. Our colony ship did not malfunction. It followed coordinates that appeared in the dreams of its navigator. Coordinates that led to the primary control nexus of the architect, defense network. High Arbiter Zinthos had gone very still on his crystal platform, and Marcus could see his 4 eyes fixed on the hologram with an expression that might have been terror. You are lying, the Lazari ambassador hissed. But her scales had gone pale, and her voice shook slightly. The Sentinels are dormant. They have been dormant for 1,000,000 years. They cannot be activated. They cannot be activated by you, Marcus corrected her. But that is because they were never meant for you. He pressed another button on his device, and the hologram changed to show something even more incredible. Text appeared in the air. Symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. And as Marcus watched, he saw the delegates leaning forward to study them with expressions of confusion and wonder. This is the language of the architects, he said. Your scientists have studied it for thousands of years and never been able to translate more than a few basic words. But when the Hope's journey arrived at the control nexus, the Sentinels woke up and transmitted this message directly into the minds of every human on board. That is impossible. The Velkari delegate clicked, his compound eyes reflecting the holographic text. The architect language is based on neural patterns that no modern species possesses. We have confirmed this through centuries of research. No species in the Concorde possesses those patterns, Marcus agreed. But humanity does. The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates shouted and hissed and pulsed with agitated light. But Marcus simply stood in the center of it all and waited for the noise to die down when it finally did. Zinthus spoke in a voice that sounded older and more tired than Marcus had ever heard. Explain yourself. Human. Marcus nodded and took a deep breath. The architects did not die 1,000,000 years ago, he said. They left, and they left on purpose, because their work in this galaxy was done. He gestured to the hologram, which now showed star maps and diagrams that pulsed with an inner light. They spent millions of years seeding this galaxy with life, guiding evolution, building the infrastructure that all of you depend on today. And when they were satisfied that their children could survive on their own, they departed for somewhere else, another galaxy, another dimension. We do not know, but they did not leave empty-handed, Marcus continued. They left behind caretakers, guardians who would watch over their children until someone was ready to take the next step. The Sentinels. Zinta said slowly, yes. The Sentinels, and not just weapons. The message we received explained everything. The Sentinels are also terraformers, medical stations, teaching machines, libraries containing all the knowledge the architects accumulated over millions of years of existence. Marcus looked around the chamber at the delegates, who had spent 3 days mocking and threatening his species. The architects left behind a gift, he said. But they did not leave it for everyone. They designed the Sentinels to recognize specific patterns, neural structures, and genetic markers and behavioral traits that would identify the species they wanted to inherit their legacy. And you claim those patterns belong to humanity. The Elorian delegate pulsed, its form flickering with colors that Marcus did not recognize. I do not claim anything, Marcus replied. The Sentinels made that determination themselves when the Hope's journey arrived. The machine scanned every being on board, and when they found humans, they woke up. He paused to let his words sink in. All of them. Every Sentinel in the galaxy. Thousands of ancient war machines scattered across every sector of space. They all received the same signal at the same moment. The children have arrived. The wait is over. The chamber had gone so quiet that Marcus could hear the hum of the station's environmental systems. You are asking us to believe, Zinta said carefully, that the architects, the beings who built everything we have, specifically chose humanity to inherit their power. I am not asking you to believe anything, Marcus said. I am telling you what happened, and I am offering you a choice about what happens next. He deactivated the hologram and stood, alone in the center of the chamber, a single human facing the combined might of the Galactic Concord. Right now, Sentinels are waking up all over the galaxy, in your space, in our space, in the dead zones and forbidden regions where no one has traveled for thousands of years. And they are all waiting for instructions. Instructions from whom? Sithar demanded, her scales shifting through colors that Marcus had never seen before. Marcus met her eyes without flinching. From me? He said simply, from any human who asks. The Sentinels were designed to serve us, to protect us, to help us grow into whatever the architects believed we could become. Then you could destroy us, Zinta said. And his voice held no anger, only a kind of weary acceptance. You could command those machines to wipe the Concord from existence. I could, Marcus agreed. And after the way you have treated my people, after the raids and the insults and the casual cruelty, there are many on Earth who believe that is exactly what we should do. He paused and looked around the chamber one more time. But that is not why I am here. The first reports arrived before Marcus could finish speaking, transmitted directly to the communication systems of every delegate in the chamber. From the Visari border worlds came images of a sentinel, rising from beneath the crust of a barren moon where it had slept for 1,000,000 years. And in the images the ancient machine was surrounded by the debris of 53 Visari warships that had been reduced to atoms in the span of a single heartbeat. The raiders, who had tormented human colonies for years, had finally met something they could not bully or intimidate. And they had not survived the encounter. Sithra's scales went white as she watched the destruction of her fleet. And for the first time since Marcus had entered the chamber, the Lazari ambassador had nothing to say. More reports followed in rapid succession, each one more incredible than the last. A sentinel in Valkyrie space had positioned itself above their largest military installation and was broadcasting a signal that their scientists could not decode. But Marcus knew what it was saying, a warning to leave human ships alone or face the consequences. An Elorian research station that had been studying architect ruins for centuries suddenly found itself surrounded by 3 sentinels that seemed to be scanning their database and comparing it to records of their own. And the researchers reported that the ancient machines were correcting their translations. filling in gaps that had puzzled scholars for thousands of years. Even in the neutral zones, sentinels were appearing. Ancient guardians that had hidden themselves in asteroid fields and gas giants and the hearts of dying stars. All of them awake, all of them active. All of them responding to the signal that had come from human minds. "This is an act of war," the Volcari delegate shrieked, his mandibles clicking so fast that his translator could barely keep up. "Humanity has unleashed these weapons against the Concord." "We have not unleashed anything," Marcus replied calmly. "The Sentinels are simply responding to the presence of humans in space. They are not attacking anyone who does not attack first. And they are not threatening anyone who does not threaten us. Your raiders attacked the Thesari fleet," Sithara hissed. And there was something almost like fear in her voice now. "The Thesari fleet attacked a human colony ship," Marcus corrected her. "Ah!" The sentinel that was sleeping in that system woke up when it detected human distress signals and responded accordingly. He looked at the Thesari ambassador with an expression that held no sympathy. "Your ships fired first." The sentinels simply made sure they could not fire again. The chamber descended into chaos as delegates shouted and argued and demanded action. But there was a new note in their voices now, a trembling uncertainty that had not been there before. They had spent 3 days treating humanity like troublesome children who needed to be disciplined. And now they were discovering that those children had awakened something that made all their power. Meaningless High Arbiter Zinthus raised one massive claw, and the chamber slowly fell silent. "You said you are not here to destroy us," the old Krethni said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Then tell us why you are here, human. Tell us what you want." Marcus nodded and stepped forward, his boots clicking on the crystalline floor. "I want what humanity has always wanted," he said. "I want a place at the table, real representation in the Concord. A voice in the decisions that affect our people and our worlds. You could simply take that by force," Zinthus pointed out, "with the Sentinels at your command. You could dissolve the Concord entirely and rule the galaxy as your architect masters intended." "The architects were not our masters," Marcus replied. "They were our predecessors, and there is an important difference." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his device again. And this time, the hologram showed something different, not weapons or war machines, but something that looked almost like a garden. The message we received from the control nexus included more than just activation codes for the Sentinels, Marcus explained. It included the history of the architects themselves, the story of who they were and why they did what they did. The hologram showed beings that looked strange and beautiful, creatures of light and matter and something in between, and they moved through structures that seemed to grow and change around them like living things. "They started like us," Marcus said softly, "small and scared and alone on a single world, surrounded by a universe they did not understand. And they grew. Over millions of years, they grew. They made mistakes and learned from them. They fought wars and made peace. They discovered terrible truths about the universe and found ways to live with them. And then they left." Zinthus said. "They left because their journey was complete," Marcus agreed. "They had learned everything this galaxy could teach them, and they were ready for something new. But they did not want their knowledge to die with them." He gestured to the hologram, which now showed the Sentinels being constructed. Thousands of them scattered across the galaxy like seeds waiting to grow. They built the Sentinels to preserve what they had learned, to protect the species that would come after them, and to wait for someone who was ready to take the next step. And they chose humanity, the Elorian delegate pulsed, its form flickering with colors that seemed almost warm. "They chose whoever would be ready first," Marcus corrected. "And the criteria they used had nothing to do with intelligence or power or technology. They looked for something else entirely, something that they believed was more important than all of those things combined." "What?" Zinthus asked. Marcus smiled. "Potential. he said. The capacity to grow, to change, to become something better than what you are. The architects were not looking for species that had already achieved greatness. They were looking for species that still believed greatness was possible. He looked around the chamber at delegates who had stopped shouting and started listening. Humanity is young and flawed, and we make mistakes every day. Marcus continued, but we have never stopped trying to be better than we are. We have never stopped dreaming of what we could become. And that is what the architects were looking for all along. The vote took 3 days, and Marcus Cole waited patiently while the delegates argued and debated and slowly came to terms with the new reality that humanity had brought into their lives. The Desari opposed everything at first, demanding that the Sentinels be destroyed or deactivated, or at least removed from their space. But their objections grew quieter when a Sentinel positioned itself in orbit around their homeworld. Not threatening, just watching. A silent reminder that the rules of the galaxy had changed. The Valkyrie demanded concessions and guarantees and binding treaties that would limit how humanity could use the architect technology. And Marcus agreed to most of their terms because he had come to negotiate, not to conquer. The Elorians proposed philosophical frameworks and ethical guidelines that would govern the integration of Sentinel technology into Concord civilization. And Marcus listened carefully to their suggestions and incorporated the best of them into the final agreement. Even High Arbiter Zinthus contributed to the discussions, his ancient wisdom helping to bridge gaps between species that had distrusted each other for thousands of years. And through it all, Marcus held firm to the core of what he had come to offer. Humanity would not keep the Sentinels for themselves. They would share them with every species in the Concord. The knowledge and the technology and the protection that the architects had left behind. All of it would belong to everyone. I do not understand, Sithara said on the final day of negotiations. Her scale shifting through colors that Marcus had learned meant confusion. You could rule us all. You could make the Desari and the Valkyrie and everyone else bow before you. Why would you give that power away? Marcus looked at the Desari ambassador and thought about all the raids she had ordered against human colonies. All the lives that had been lost because of her ambition and cruelty. He thought about how easy it would be to command the Sentinels to punish her, to destroy her fleet and her worlds and everything she had ever cared about. And then he thought about what the architects had believed in. The potential for growth and change and becoming something better. Because power is not the point, Marcus said finally. The architects did not leave behind weapons so that one species could dominate all the others. They left behind tools so that all of us could grow together. He gestured to the hologram that still floated in the center of the chamber, showing Sentinels scattered across the galaxy like stars. These machines can do more than fight, he continued. They can terraform planets and cure diseases and teach us things that we cannot imagine, but only if we work together. Only if we stop treating each other as enemies and start treating each other as partners. You speak of partnership, Zinthus said slowly, but humanity is still young. You have been among the stars for only 30 of your years. How can you partner with species that have traveled between worlds for millennia? Marcus smiled. That is exactly why you need us, he said. You have all grown so comfortable with what you have that you have stopped trying to grow. You found the architect's technology and you used it, but you never asked where it came from or what it was for. He looked around the chamber at delegates who were listening now instead of laughing. Humanity asks questions, Marcus continued. We look at the universe and we wonder why things are the way they are. We take things apart to see how they work. And we dream about making them better. That is what the architect saw in us. Not wisdom or power or experience, but curiosity. The hunger to learn and grow and become something new. The final vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Galactic Concord agreed to grant humanity full representation on the tribunal. With a voice equal to any other species in matters of policy and law, they agreed to end the raids on human colonies and to punish those who had participated in them. They agreed to share their knowledge and their resources with humanity, and in return, humanity agreed to share the Sentinels with everyone, and they created a new position, one that had never existed before, the human liaison to the Architect legacy, responsible for overseeing the awakening of Sentinel technology and ensuring that its benefits were distributed fairly across the galaxy. Marcus Cole was the first to hold that title, though he knew he would not be the last after the final vote. He stood alone on the observation deck of the Tribunal station, watching the star's wheels slowly pass the massive windows. The door behind him opened, and he heard the heavy footsteps of Zinthus approaching. "You could have destroyed us," the High Arbiter said, joining Marcus at the window. The moment those machines woke, "You could have commanded them to end the Concord forever. Why did you not?" Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. "1,000,000 years ago," he said finally, "the architects looked at the galaxy and saw potential. They could have stayed and ruled forever. They could have made themselves gods. But they chose to step back and let their children grow. They trusted that, one day, someone would be ready to continue their work." He turned to face the ancient Crethany. "You asked what makes humans special," Marcus said. "It is not our technology or our strength. It is that we have never stopped believing we can be better than we are. Every generation, we try to leave something better for the next. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we fail badly. But we never stop trying." Zinthos was quiet for a long moment. "And you believe the Concord can learn this?" he asked. "I believe everyone can," Marcus replied. "That is the real gift the architects left behind, not the machines, but the reminder that growth does not have an endpoint, that there is always another horizon to reach for." The old Crethany made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You humans," he said. "So young, so naive, so very helpful." Marcus smiled and looked out at the stars. "It has gotten us this far," he said. Outside the window, a sentinel drifted past, ancient and vast and patient, its hull gleaming with lights that had not shone in 1,000,000 years. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, the architects watched their youngest children take their first true steps among the stars, and they found them worthy.